Welcome back. We're going to be diving into something that I know everybody is really interested in, the potential for a US-based HBAR ETF. Now, to get into that, we have some really special guests here today. We have Eric Balchunas. He is a senior analyst at Bloomberg focused on ETFs. We also have Stephen McClurg. He is the founder and CEO of Canary Capital. They are the first to file a US-based HBAR ETF. And then we have Gregg Bell. He is from the Hedera Foundation. Now it's called the Hedera Foundation, and he's focused on financial markets. Now, before we get into this, we might have some additional viewers, so I wanted to explain what Hedera is. Hedera is a layer one, similar to Solana or Ethereum. You can build all kinds of things on top of it. It has some really impressive technical features. It can handle an impressive amount of throughput, so the amount of transactions per second it can handle. And actually with sharding, it can handle pretty much unlimited scaling. It also has really fast time to finality. Blockchains actually are probabilistic, where Hashgraph, which Hedera is built on top of, has actual finality. So that's how fast a transaction can be processed. It also has the gold standard in security, something called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. And I haven't heard any other networks that actually have boasted that kind of security, and that's been proven out by a COQ proof. In addition, they've had some really good business decisions. So the fees are paid, of course, in the native cryptocurrency, that's HBAR, but it's priced in dollars. So that allows for planning for the businesses that are building on top of Hedera to be much easier. In addition, we have the Hedera Governing Council. It's governed by blue chip companies throughout the world. We have Boeing and Google, Deutsche Telekom, Tata Communications, and the list goes on. There are 32 of them right now, and that's going to be growing to 39 total over time. Hopefully, we'll get to there before the end of the year. And then my favorite is some of the use cases that are being built on top of Hedera. And there are, of course, thousands of different use cases, but some of the hottest right now, NVIDIA and Intel is embedding Hedera technology into their chips to solve some of the problems we're seeing in the hottest space right now, AI. We also have today, SpaceX has a launch of the second constellation of satellites for transactional Internet of Things from YSAT and CLSQ. They already have millions of different objects out there, and they're going to use a Hedera token to facilitate the exchanges between these objects. And finally, my favorite, Karate Combat. It's a relatively new sports league that is revolutionizing how you can engage with fans. They're growing exponentially through something called Up Only Gaming. They have another event coming out on the 24th. Certainly check that out. But let's get into what we're really excited about today, and that's the potential for that HBAR ETF here in the United States. Stephen, I'm going to start off with you. I think the crypto space was a little taken aback at the Canary Capital ETF filing. Can you tell us why you chose to make an HBAR-backed product one of your first?
Yeah, well, what's funny is Eric is on, and Eric actually read my mind a lot and put a lot of things on Twitter. I was like, man, how did you know all this? Because we didn't talk about it. But really, what we did was, we thought that there'd be an opportunity if Trump was elected, that there would be an opportunity for more token-based, token-based ETFs. And the first thing we did was we looked at the top 20 by market cap and kind of filtered that list and said, okay, what do we believe is not a security? And then once we got down to that list, the next question was, well, what has the SEC not said is a security? And really the only two that popped out were Litecoin and HBAR. So that was a decision process. And then XRP, we believed that the courts would state that XRP wasn't a security, which they did. So it left us with, three options there. So we thought, okay, we might have a shot here to, file a couple of single token ETFs, see if we can get in behind Ethereum, and we're working through that process. But that was our process in decision making. I can go a little deeper into that, but that really was the basics.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to it. Now, Eric, what Stephen just kind of touched on there, I was also a bit surprised that Bloomberg came out and you put a post out saying that the HBAR ETF might actually hit before the Solana and the XRP ETFs. I think your colleague, it was James Seyffert, was the one who actually did that analysis. But can you just dig into that a little bit and explain why?
Yeah, no, well, Steve's smart because again, with this new SEC, there's we don't totally know how they're going to operate, but it looks good. But the current situation is that if the SEC has ID'd it as a security and it's named as a security in pending lawsuits, they wouldn't be able to approve it under the current act. Thus, those would be sort of Solana XRP would be kind of held hostage by this situation for a minute or two. These don't have that albatross hanging above them or whatever. And so these two would be easier to push through. Litecoin in particular, because it would be pretty much classified as a commodity. I don't think there's much debate there. So what we thought was that we would get the Ether Bitcoin combos, which those are no problem. They're going to come out. Litecoin would be next, in my opinion. If I'm just going by like HBAR and then XRP Solana after that, because I believe, and Steve may correct me, that the SEC would have to rescind their lawsuits. But again, and I'd like to get Steve's take on this, there's all these like things they've said and things we get hung up on. Oh, there's no futures, this. But all of this is really just technical things that were under the direction of the guy who used to run the SEC. If a new person steps in and they just want it all approved, my guess is they can probably figure out legal ways to just get it through. So that's why this Trump win was so huge. But it's possible the new SEC head does want to respect the staff and the legacy before it. I don't know how respectful they'll be of that. If they are, then what I said earlier is probably true. But I guess it's possible they come in and just, override everything. There's a lot of unknowns still. That's why we have not. Nate Geraci has his predictions already. We haven't quite been out there yet. We just feel like, and we've also got we had a little chatter on Litecoin that was positive. So that's why we're, moving towards course tuning. We're not fine tuned yet, but we're course tuning towards Litecoin HBAR than the other two.
That makes perfect sense. Now, just to go in, what are the potential roadblocks you see right now for an HBAR listing, maybe that we haven't touched on? It is between 10 and $12 billion market cap. It might not be as broadly traded or be as deep as you might see with some of the other tokens. What are some of the other roadblocks you might see?
Technically, I don't know. What's Ether's market cap?
Oh, geez, you're well over 100 billion, right? So
Yeah.
A couple hundred billion, something like that. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know, of course, HBAR off the top of my head, but not Ethereum.
I'll be honest with you. So I've been covering ETFs for 20 years, and about once a year there's a filing where I don't even know what the hell it is. I have to Google the name. This was that filing for this year. Mm-hmm. 6 years ago, as I was actually quantum computing, I'd never heard that phrase. Now that's a big deal. So in 6 years from now, HBAR could be like a household name. But at the time, I was like, what is this? And then I saw some of these big tech logos involved with it, which seems pretty promising. I don't see any holdup. Again, this is if Gensler was the chair, there'd be many things you could say, including, well, we need to have futures on them. That's the big one. But I don't know if that's going to apply with this SEC. So, I believe they're going to try to start getting futures on some of the other coins. But does that matter under the new chair? Probably not, but it might. And if that matters, then that would be one. But there's plenty of ETFs in Europe that track all this stuff, and they don't have futures, and they work fine. I've always been of the mind that the ETF is such a durable structure that's been proven over and over. I mean, there's some ETFs that hold really whack stuff in other asset classes. For some reason, everybody thinks it's all SPY, but there's been some funky stuff launched, and it works fine. I mean, sometimes they morph into a closed-end fund for a day or a couple minutes where their prices deviates from the NAV. People fine with it; they get over it. So, I think Hester Peirce in particular is of that mindset. What I just said, which is, we trust the ETF, just disclose everything, and then the investor can make their decision. That libertarian attitude would mean that this would not have any problems, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Now, Stephen, I know that Eric mentioned there that you can jump in at any time if you have anything you want to add, but I do want to ask Gregg, we had a question from Awesome Life who said, what is the purpose of an HBAR ETF? Can you talk about the benefits for the HBAR economy and the HBAR itself, and the Hedera itself?
I think there are probably a lot of people similar to Eric that, have not been previously exposed to HBAR and to Hedera. And so there's the awareness component that comes into just the publicity as it relates to this filing. And I think that's really exciting because that drives to just the growing ecosystem and the growing awareness of what Hedera is all about. And I think that's really where there is this potential to really bring in significant new amount of an investor base and generate generation of capital. Specifically, I would say from a boomer generation or generations that maybe haven't been as crypto native, because the ETF as a product itself really has that embedded custody and distribution channels directly in the product. And I think that's really one of the reasons why there's been such massive success for some of the other crypto ETFs is because it enables people to onboard to and gain exposure to cryptocurrency without having to solve for custody themselves, without having to potentially onboard to a cryptocurrency exchange or a new service provider. They can use the financial service providers that they already have in place to gain access, and that's a really powerful component. So there's the benefits as it relates to the distribution and awareness, and then that to me highlights the strengths of Hedera, right? The fact that Hedera is the most used network in terms of transaction count, the fact that Hedera has extreme enterprise adoption in terms of the governing council, those that are validating transactions and building on the network, from tech giants like Dell, Google, IBM, LG, etc., to investment banks like Nomura, Shinhan Bank, to corporates like Boeing, you mentioned Tata, Mondelez. I mean, these are trusted global brands, and I believe that will resonate with an audience that is looking at Hedera for the first time. Then there's also benefits as it relates to the new institutions, the service providers, the research coverage that comes into the space for an ETF that wouldn't necessarily cover cryptocurrency natively. And that includes interest from futures markets participants. And so I think there is a snowball effect as it relates to the institutional awareness and coverage that comes with the product. I also am a big believer, and I think Eric and Stephen both alluded to this, in the future of there being multi-cryptocurrency basket ETF products, right? There's not necessarily just single asset ETFs. And so when you go through the process of completing an S1 and the legal disclosures as it relates to covering any of these assets, specifically Hedera here, that's public in nature. And so now it's sort of an open source mentality where other institutions, other firms can educate themselves in a format that they know is already approved and can redeploy that for future products. So I think that the securities industry benefits from this, and so does HBAR in terms of those public disclosures.
Well, Stephen, going back to some of the things that Gregg just mentioned, I think that Hedera and HBAR are going to resonate on a different level that some of the other cryptocurrencies have, especially with Generation X and boomers out there, which just so happens to have some of the most money. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I don't want to talk too specifically to the HBAR ETF, but maybe I'll talk about ETFs in general. And let's talk about the Bitcoin ETF, how important that was. It's actually, the primary focus of Canary is actually running hedge fund, and our hedge fund actually trades the ETF for Bitcoin over Bitcoin itself because there's more volume, there's professional market makers in the game, and it's just easier to trade. So we focus on if there's an ETF available, we'd rather trade that. Now we still trade both, right? We still have accounts open where we're trading direct tokens, direct Bitcoin, because we might want to do some things over the weekend. But generally, ETF just makes things easier. And whether you're a boomer or young person, it's so much easier to have an online brokerage account where you're trading these ETFs.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Another thing that people are really curious about is how the flows work for something like this. From it being a day-to-day, getting it initially set up, how do you get the HBAR into it? And then from a day-to-day operation standpoint, how do those HBAR flows work into and out of an ETF like this?
So right now, what the SEC has done is only allowed cash creates and cash redeems, which is unusual for ETFs, but in crypto, that's the way that it's being done. So really, what happens is if there's creates, and what that means is there's the way that ETFs work on the back end is it's arbitrage. You know, there's a certain amount of market cap of that ETF, and if demand is higher than what the market cap is, then there's inflows, and that's created by the arbitrage by the APs and the market makers. So you know, they'll create new shares to absorb that demand, and if there's less demand or a lot of selling pressure, there might be outflows, and that arbitrage creates that. That's kind of what makes an ETF such a great vehicle. So in the case of crypto in general, when those shares are created, cash is deposited. We then have to trade the cash and then deposit the Bitcoin by the end of the day into the custodian account. That's just how Bitcoin works, and that's how we expect it to work in the future for new products as well. There are folks out there that are trying to get in-kind creations and redemptions. I don't know if that will happen under the new administration, but there are certainly efforts to work with the SEC and to getting that allowed. So we might see a change there, we might not, but for now it's pure cash.
I think that comment there immediately asks you asked the question: are in-kind contributions or redemptions from ETFs, crypto ETFs, on the horizon? And I'm curious, Eric, what are your thoughts there? Do you think that will be something we might see within this new administration?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was a Gary Gensler thing. And even BlackRock really wanted it. They were pushing hard to get in-kind up to the last minute. That was the reason that the whole idea of like, oh, Larry Fink can make a phone call, and that's why the Bitcoin ETFs were going to get approved, was maybe a little too much, because Larry couldn't get in-kind. When you do in-kind, you kind of open up the ETF to source the underlying cryptocurrency from anywhere. Whereas if it's cash, the issuer can go to sources that way you don't get like, I don't know, what would you call that, laundered Bitcoin or like dirty Bitcoin in the fund?
Tornado cash or something like that?
Something like that, I guess, yeah. That said, like, you know, it's not like US dollars are totally clean. It's just it's a Gensler thing, you know? But everybody was like, all right, cash is better than nothing. But nobody really liked, everybody wanted in kind. So anyway, with the new SEC chair, they're probably going to do it because Hester Peirce was on an interview with somebody. It was a podcast like this, and she said something like it's on the table, or it was very good, strong hint that both that and even Ether staking would be fine. And she's just like I said, she's a libertarian at heart, and she had like what do you call what's that kind of cat? Cheshire cat.
Oh yeah, Cheshire cat. Sure.
She looked very happy because she said something like, well, when the person running the SEC leaves and there's a new person who's okay with this, well, things are going to change. She said something so direct that was like, adult mature talk for it's a new sheriff in town, and we're gonna do things differently now. That's a really good sign. So I feel like whoever comes in this chair, she's going to be a great partner for them because she's been a commissioner for many years, and she's had to write opinion after opinion on these things. So I would look for both those to happen this year.
You could tell that Hester Peirce was just kind of shaking her head the entire time Gensler was in, from what I could tell. Greg, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, one of the things that I've been asking myself, and a lot of this is crystal ball, but to what degree does an American first policy really play into this market, right? I mean, Hedera is one of the protocols that was born in the United States, born in Texas in 1819, right? It is an American birth protocol. And so, there seems to be a divergence in the crypto market between those that have a domestic U.S. focus or origin versus international. I'll be curious to see if that plays out or benefits HBAR and Hedera within the ETF realm.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, Eric, I know you cover pretty much the entire ETF space. So even though you've been really paying attention to the crypto ETFs over the past year, you don't have time to look into all of these tokens and do the deep dives that we do on a regular basis. So do you have any questions for us about the Hedera network or the HBAR?
I think sometimes when you guys talk about these, like you can build anything, well, what? Like, I think you guys need more examples. Bitcoin, I get. It's a great network built on military, Cold War technology, decentralized cryptography, great in security, great store of value. The government can't kill it. Okay, got it. Ether is like, oh, it's the internet of money, or it's the world computer, or digital oil. I'm like, okay, what is it? What are you talking about? But then someone was like, well, you know how like Amazon and Microsoft, like 3 companies control the whole internet? Isn't that a little scary? And you're like, yeah. And like, Ether solves that. Ether is a web that's outside of that nobody controls. Oh, okay. And Ether is sort of the fuel that you use to build stuff on that network. So basically, that's a way to make money off the growth of that if it grows. Okay, got it. You guys need something like that. Like, what are you solving here? Like, you got to hit me like, don't you hate it that 3 companies own the internet? Or with Bitcoin, it's like, don't you hate it when the government basically prints money to solve every conceivable problem, and so your purchasing power of $1 declines? Don't you hate that? What's your don't you hate that?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say right off the bat is all the things that Ethereum wants to solve, Hedera actually has the capabilities to do all of those things and do it at scale. That's the main thing, but you're right, we absolutely need that quick pitch, the few one-liners that can catch people's attention. But Greg, what did you want to add?
I think it's the proven scalability of the network, right? That can operate at a throughput that is, immensely larger than that of Ethereum. And then when you get to specific examples, that's the power of an open source network, is that anybody can build, and all these corporations are doing different things. But the home known brands like Mondelez, the maker of Oreo cookies, that is utilizing the network to record their coupons and address coupon fraud. There's corporate applications here that are massive. There's a significant percentage chance that the 4 of us right now are wearing clothes that have been recorded. The supply chain has been recorded on Hedera at this very moment, right? And so it's large corporations that are utilizing, and largely supply chain is the application that has been the most prominent number of transactions on the network. And that's why you see car auto manufacturers like Kia and Hyundai that are using Hedera to record their supply chains, right? So there's corporate applications, and each of the use cases is a little different, but I absolutely agree. I think the narrative for every protocol needs to be extremely succinct and short, and the better that can be distilled, the more adoption and easier it is for someone to understand really why you're using Hedera or why you're using any protocol, what problem really is being solved.
So are you saying that the Oreo cookies might be cheaper, or might have like, okay, fine, you using this network, is the network saving them money, or is it preventing fraud? Like, how does the end consumer?
Yeah, so it's a fraud prevention, right? I think in many ways the blockchains or distributed protocols are trust mistakes, just really addressing trust problems. So where is their fraud? So coupon fraud is a significant issue for any retailer on a global basis, certainly the size of Mondelez. And so to the extent that you're addressing a specific financial problem, such as fraud for a market, that's huge. And then you have the added benefits of being able to say, well, I have, as a corporation, greater understanding of the way my customers interact with my products in a real-time basis. Like, that's a really powerful value proposition to an institution.
Okay, so what I would do if I were you, I would say that this is like, next generation accounting tracking software to make companies, better managed, and then that's how you'd say it to the institutional world. But to the retail world, you may want to come up with like some some like examples of like the coupon's pretty good, and you could be like, well, and if they can eliminate coupon fraud, then that's a little less they may pass on to the customer, because that's people ripping them off, which ends up getting, I would just try to figure out a way to bring it back home, because sometimes these coins, it just gets real lost in the jargon, and it's like, what's even going on? But basically, you're a competitor to Ether.
We are. There's no question about that. And if you look at the efficiency of Hedera, that's what I think a lot of this comes down to. Hedera is many times more efficient than every other network you see out there, but it's also more efficient than the traditional rails that we have. It's 1,000 times more efficient than Visa. So yes, SKUX and Mondelez are starting out with promotions and coupons, but SKUX is adamant that they are a payments company. So eventually they're going to get into the payment space. And we have a lot of other examples of that as well. But, I want to get back to the focus for today, get back into the ETF. Stephen, can you give us any other details about what you're planning as far as expense ratios, how you want to deal with staking rewards, because of course Hedera is a proof of stake network, or anything else you think the audience might be interested in?
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't really get into a whole lot of details right now. There's obviously rules around that when you have a filing and it hasn't launched yet. The only thing I will say is on the broad subject of staking, right now the SEC does not allow staking of tokens within an ETF. I understand their argument. The argument is, well, if you allow staking, then it's essentially, something is expecting, you're expecting a profit from the work of others, and it could classify it as a security. I don't agree, but I understand the argument. So for now, none of the crypto ETFs are allowed to have staking. It is something that we'd like to have further conversations with, and I can't boldly say that yes, the SEC is going to do it in the next year or two. But I've got to be a little bit more political here. But I do believe it's something that will come later across the board.
Eric, do you want to weigh in on staking? I know you mentioned that earlier.
No, I mean, I think he covered it. I would. How much does it matter to somebody buying an Ether ETF? I don't know. I think it'll benefit them when it happens, but they're doing okay without it. They let them do staking in Europe, and it works fine. Like I said, Europe has been a great test incubation for like what will work well, and it's all looks good. So I would think they would allow this, but we'll see. I don't really see any reason for them not to do it. Again, if you're in that libertarian mindset.
Yep. Well, time will tell. Gregg, I want to figure out how we can make this product as successful as possible. I want HBAR to look good. I want Hedera to look good. What are some of the things that we can do to make sure that this goes off with a bang?
I think anyone that's involved in the Hedera ecosystem, the call to action is just to continue to build, right? To continue to grow the network, to bring to light new use cases, things that highlight the strengths of the network that can't be done on legacy rails or that can't be done on other protocols. And there are numerous avenues by which those products can come to market. So I think really it's continue to build, grow the ecosystem. On a retail basis, of course, individuals and institutions can invest, right, and grow the AUM of these investable products to the extent they come to market, and or just the HBAR directly. The more liquidity, the more volume, the more the network grows. I think that is a circular and positive cycle.
Makes sense. All right, so the biggest question I got was when. Eric, what is the likelihood of number one, HBAR getting this ETF done in 2025? And what would I understand that it's hard to make a guess like this, but when do you think these things will actually come to fruition and we might see that HBAR ETF in our brokerage accounts?
Well, I don't think we don't have the 19B4 yet for HBAR. We only have the S1, right? So the 19B4 would have to be filed, and then a clock starts that's 240 days. Again, the old SEC waited. They have these incremental periods where they can say something or punt, and they always chose to punt until the last final day, which is 240 days. So let's say one filed in the end of January. What's 240 days from that? Like early fall, something like that. So that's what I would look for. But again, the 240 days isn't like you have to wait that long. You could approve it earlier. So there's just this huge unknown with how different this SEC will be. But I would say, by October, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these are on the market. We don't have formal odds yet. We're going to wait to hear something from the new SEC chair. We need a little more intel before James and I come out with one of our percentage odds, because we got a nice track record. We don't want to mess it up, and so we want to have a little more clarity. But it looks good. Like I said, the hard part is getting a new SEC chair, and that's done. Now it's a matter of it's not really so much if, it's just more of when. And I don't know if, Steve, you want to talk about when the 19B4s may want to come in, because you also need 19B4s for Solana, XRP. I don't think any 19B4s are in. There might be one for, I'm having trouble recalling. There may be one of those might have a 19B4.
All right, understood. Is this something you can weigh in on, Steve?
Yeah, I can't really. Eric's right. Without a 19B4, nothing gets done here. There have been 19B4s filed for Solana by SIBO on behalf of some of the issuers. That's happened twice, but so far no other 19B4s have been filed.
I would say this: the CBOE took a chance by following, I think it was a Solana 19B4 about a month ago. Maybe just remember, if you're first, it can help. So they might as well just take a shot now and then. But I think they had to pull it back, and they thought maybe that this lame duck SEC would just be out to lunch and just so you could start the clock. But it looked like they were no, don't do this. I think that once the new chair comes in, you might see some people taking these shots, because then they'll get the new information back to them, whether it's the same kind of, oh, it's a security, yada, yada, or it's all right, we'll look at these now. But there is a motivation to just take a shot now and then, because you want to be early on the clock. So I'm waiting, but the SEC chair isn't in, Trump gets inaugurated a week. So I would look for stuff after that, late January, February.
For any of the viewers that maybe aren't familiar with what a 19B4 is, Eric, we not just defining that maybe in layman terms for.
I'll do my best. It's basically an exemption to be able to trade. It's basically an exchange files this to be able to list this type of ETF. Whereas an S1 is, and that goes to trading in markets, an S1 is like a prospectus, like a classic mutual fund prospectus under the 1933 Act. So it's not quite a mutual fund, but it's close. And that is for disclosures and all this. A 19B4 is a little more inside baseball. But remember, if an ETF can't exist unless it's traded on exchange. So you need that, and you need the disclosure form approved. So that's why those two things were the popular, jargon file names that we went over endlessly during the Bitcoin race.
Understood. All right, Stephen, I'm going to give you the last word here. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on around this HBAR ETF?
Yeah, unfortunately, again, there's not a whole lot I can really say while the before it launches, but I hope that I hope we see something in 2025.
All right, looking forward to it. Guys, thank you so much for jumping on here today and give us the inside track around everything that's going on around these HBAR-backed products. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.